In a letter, Sally Yates, an Obama appointee, had publicly questioned the constitutionality of the president's controversial temporary refugee ban and refused to defend it in court. The ban applies to 7 countries that have been identified as having ties to terrorism. Despite protests against his move, Trump supporters say other presidents have done the same thing. And his White House team says the controversy has been overdone.
I think this has been blown way out of proportion and exaggerated.
The state of Washington has filed suit over the immigration order.
At the end of the day, either you are abiding by the Constitution or you are not. And in our view, the president is not adhering to the Constitution when it comes to his executive action.
Former President Obama has broken custom of past presidents to not criticize the current chief executive, saying in a statement, the president fundamentally disagrees with the notion of discriminating against individuals because of their faith or religion, even though the ban involves countries, not individuals. A new Rasmussen poll done by phone and online found that 57% of likely U.S. voters favor a temporary ban on refugees. 33% are opposed, while 10% are undecided. And tonight, President Trump is set to make another big announcement, naming his Supreme Court nominee to fill the vacancy left by the late Antonin Scalia. And 3 federal appeals court judges are seen as the leading candidates. Neil Gorsuch serves on the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. Thomas Hardiman works in Pittsburgh as a judge on the Philadelphia-based 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And William Pryor sits as a judge on the Atlanta-based 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. But Democrats are already threatening to filibuster his choice. Democrats are still unhappy that the Senate wouldn't give President Obama's nominee for the court last year a vote, even though leading Democrats, including now Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer, have said in the past Republican nominees should be blocked. Meanwhile, President Trump is also keeping his focus on the economy, signing an executive order to severely cut the cost of federal regulations, an action supporters say will help businesses. The move will require agencies to cut 2 current rules for every new one.
This will be the biggest such act that our country has ever seen. There will be regulation, there will be control, but it will be a normalized control where you can open your business and expand your business very easily. And that's what our country has been all about.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
You know, there was a book called Gulliver's Travels. Jonathan Swift wrote a parody and about this giant that ran among pygmies. And he was found on the beach, and the pygmies took ropes and they tied all around him and tried to get him down. And I think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a giant among a bunch of pygmies, and the pygmies are running wild, and yet the giant is moving forward, and I'm just really pleased to see it, because those of us who understand economics and understand what is necessary to increase this economy realize that we have been tied down by unbelievable regulations. They have cost trillions of dollars in growth, and they have deprived us of jobs. They have deprived us of a good standard of living. They have deprived us of all sorts of things. But this is the legacy of the progressives who insist on controlling everything. I was talking to a man yesterday, and we were talking about water regulations, and he said that a gutter on your house under the new regulations is considered a waterway, and therefore is subject to federal regulations. Terry, isn't that insane? A gutter on your house.
I'm sure there is probably a plethora kind of regulation.
Plethora of tidal wave. Well, anyhow, getting the economy moving again is job one for President Trump. And with us now to talk about it is our good friend Stephen Moore. He's an economic consultant with FreedomWorks and served as an economic advisor to the Trump campaign. Steve, good to see you again.
Hi, Pat. The first thing I'm going to do is take my gutter down. So the government can't regulate my house.
That's right. But you've got a waterway on your downspout. You've got to do something about it. Hey,
but, you know, it's really amazing what Donald Trump is. What has it been, 8 or 9 days that he's been in the White House? And I'd make the case to you Pat, that this president has done more in 9 or 10 days to help the economy than Barack Obama did in 8 years. These rollbacks of regulations, the pro-energy development. He's the Energizer Bunny in the White House. He reminds me of you, Pat. He's just forever young, and I'm very impressed. I don't agree with everything Donald Trump has done so far, but most of it I do, and I think most of it is very healthy for the economy.
Well, look, don't you think it's time? This immigration stuff is interesting, but what's really important is moving the economy. That's what he's going to be judged on. What are you telling him, or what the others have been working with you are telling him?
Well, let's start with regulation, because you're so right. That is a major cost of business. And I'll just give you one statistic, Pat, I think will blow you away. You know, there was a study that was done by the National Association of Manufacturers a few months ago, and it found that the regulation costs per employee, per manufacturer employee, is about $17,000 or $18,000. So that's like a tax on hiring American workers. And by the way, you could move that factory to, say, Mexico or China and cut those regulatory costs by $10,000 per worker. So we're destroying our manufacturing base and so many of our jobs and encouraging businesses to move abroad with these excessive regulatory costs. I believe if you cut those regulations and you get the tax cuts in place, which we've talked about on your show before, I think it's going to be a magnet for businesses to actually stop leaving the country and start coming back to the United States and creating jobs here.
Steve, what mindset is it that wants to put all these regulations are these academics who've never been in the real world? Where do they come from?
Well, you know, there's a famous story of George McGovern. Remember when George McGovern ran for president in 1972? He had been a politician his whole life. Well, after he got out of politics, he actually tried to start a little inn up in the Northeast. And he said, the regulations were so terrible I couldn't run the business. He said, I never realized that until I went into business, you know, how terrible these regulations are. Part of the problem is what you just said, Pat. A lot of these politicians and regulatories, they've never run a business. They have no idea what it takes to meet a payroll and to hire people and make a profit. And I think that's a big problem. These regulators think their whole purpose for being is to pass more and more regulations and put more onerous burdens on our businesses. And look, if you drive those businesses out of business, the people who are hurt, obviously, are the workers who get thrown out of jobs.
Well, all right, look, we've got to go for these tax cuts. Now, is there a settlement in Congress? Can we get tax cuts through, or are there going to be people who, of course, the Democrats are going to oppose anything, but are there enough Republicans to jam it through the Senate?
We need your help on this one, Pat. I think that the Republicans are talking about delaying taking up this tax bill until maybe the summer or fall of this year. I think that's way too long a delay. I think that Donald Trump should announce in his February State of the Union speech that he wants this done in 100 days. It's a vital priority. You just saw what happened at the end of last week. The fourth quarter economic growth numbers came out. They were miserable. 1.9% for the fourth quarter, 1.6% growth for the year of 2016. I mean, that's just not going to cut it. That's not enough growth to get Americans back to work. We got to make these tax cuts a priority. They have to get done right away. This is, as you know, Pat, this is what Ronald Reagan did when he was president in 1981. He didn't wait 6 or 9 months. He got that tax cut passed right away. And you remember how amazing that was for the economy and the big boom we saw when those tax cuts
took off like a rocket.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, they won't get a comprehensive bill in, which we'd all love to see, but what elements do you think they can put in place in a hurry?
We got to get those business tax rates down. We have the highest business tax in the world. Can you believe that, Pat?
Yeah.
We have the highest business taxes in the world. I mean, that's just stupid. Why would we impose these high taxes on our own businesses? So we've got to bring those down. You know, a lot of these companies are moving to Ireland or Canada or Germany or China and Mexico because the taxes are lower. That's not the only reason, but it's a big reason. So here's the idea, Pat. You're going to love this. Okay. Let's go from a 35% tax rate on our businesses, which is the highest in the world, down to 15%. Which would be one of the lowest. Now, you know what that impact is that going to be. These companies are going to come back to the United States. And by the way, a lot of them have already said, if you cut that tax rate down to 15 or 20%, we are going to invest more in America. We are going to hire more workers. So that has to be the priority.
See, what about the spending cuts? He's talking about $1 trillion over 10 years. What will be cut, do you think, to get that number?
Well, you know, bigger numbers than that even, perhaps trillions of dollars of spending cuts. And that means, you know, he wants to increase spending on the military to rebuild our military. He wants more infrastructure spending, but almost all of the other domestic programs are going to take some severe cuts. I mean, my goodness, do we really need to spend $60 billion on the Department of Education when it had almost no effect on local schools and people's communities around the country? Do we need a Department of Energy? For goodness sakes, let's just have the free market work in energy. We can cut subsidies in agriculture. We can cut corporate welfare benefits. So I think that there's a significant room for improvement. I'll give you one amazing statistic.
Okay.
Did you know, Pat, every year, according to the federal government's own accountants and auditors, the federal government spends $160 billion on erroneous and fraudulent payments in Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, earned income tax credit. That's amazing. I didn't say 160 million. I said 160 billion.
Well, a billionaire and a billion, as Dirksen said, before long you're talking real money. All right, if they put these moves in, how fast can the economy grow?
That's a great question. I think it's going to take a little while, but I think you can get to 4% growth, up from 1.5% growth, which we had last year under Obama. I think by the end of give us to the end of this year. It takes a little while for these policies to take part. But look what's happened to the stock market already. Look at what has happened to small business confidence. Look what's happened to consumer confidence. All these indicators are pointing to the fact that businesses and consumers and employers like what Donald Trump is talking about doing. Now we get Congress to implement it.
Well, we've freed, I mean, like Gulliver, the Lilliputians are losing and the Giants are winning. Steve,
yeah,
thanks.
But they're not going to hold this guy down. He's like you. He's not to be held down. I mean, I've never seen, you know, I traveled with Donald Trump. I spent a lot of time on the campaign trail. Yeah. I've never seen anybody who was so committed. And, you know, one of the reasons liberals are so angry right now, Pat, is this is a politician who is not actually a politician, he's a businessman turned politician who actually is doing what he said he was going to do. He's keeping his promises to voters.
Unbelievable. Steve Moore, thank you for being with us. Come back soon.